my very good friend Elenor Ling, who's Senior Curator of Prints and Drawings at the Fitzwilliam Museum. We met about 10 years ago, I think, when I was I was in an exhibition with another artist called Jane Dixon, and ever since then we've somehow keep coinciding, including in Edinburgh quite recently. Elenor is one of Britain's great print curators and knows a huge amount about print, and for those of us who live making prints, people like Elenor are very important and also a wonderful source of knowledge. So there we are.
and I'm going to introduce Susan, which we could go on for a long time, couldn't we? So yes, we met, I was delighted to meet Susan about a whole decade ago. I can't believe so much time has passed. For this development of the show at the Fitzwilliam, and I was fascinated to learn. It was called
not reality, realization.
Realization, yeah. Curated by the great Craig Hartley. And I loved learning more about you because you're just fascinating. So you have a background in your degree was in philosophy. That's right, at Nottingham.
Yeah.
And then you just decided just to become an artist, and you a course at St Martin's in printmaking. Is that right?
No, I did.
Metropolitan.
Yes. London Met.
London Met. Sorry. And then you had this careership, but because you had that background, I think, in a different discipline, you've always been interested in the cross fertilisation for different, this interdisciplinary, the richness that can be got from sciences and medicine and art, and so that's every project, every body of artistic work has had that those different aspects feeding into it, which is all because it's such richness. And you've got works in every major collection in Britain, including luckily the Fitzwilliam, and you've had residences all over the place, including up in Newcastle, we'll talk about. And you are the trustee of the wonderful Curwen Study Centre.
I'm very proud to be
here. Yeah, we're really grateful to be here today, and thank you for inviting me, and I'm really pleased to be here. So, here we are, sat amongst your project, Reassembling the Self. And I thought I would start off, I think it's really important to have an idea of background. So I was going to ask, so you produce these prints with the wonderful Stanley Jones, and we'll go into most of this, we're going to be talking about him a lot, but I want to understand how you haven't worked with lithography before. So how did this come about? Did you have the residency up in the Hassan and the exhibition there, and then did that come first, or did meeting Stanley come? What came first?
Meeting Stanley came first, but I met him through a friend of mine and gave him some catalogues. And Stanley, I don't know, probably many of you might not have met him, but Stanley is a master of understatement. So the first thing, he looked at my catalogue and he said, "I think I can do something with you." And so I left it, so I left it a few years, and then I got commissioned to do this gallery, this exhibition up in Newcastle called Reassembling the Self, which was about human identity, focusing a lot on schizophrenia. In fact, Nick, who's here, you gave a talk at the show, didn't you? Many years ago, and the project. So the project was in a very big gallery, and I wanted to make a big body of work. And I thought a lot about it. I was working with two artists who had a schizophrenia diagnosis, and I realised that their work told the story of living with schizophrenia in a way that I couldn't. So I wanted to make a body of work that made the audience feel very, very uncomfortable. I wanted to, by talking to Camilla and Kevin, who were living with a schizophrenia diagnosis, I wanted to understand how uncomfortable they felt in their own bodies, and that's what I was trying to do with this body of work, which was to rearrange body parts so that when you looked at them you feel uncomfortable. And so I came to talk to Stanley about it, and he said, I think I can do something with you. And I got an Arts Council grant. Funding is always important for an artist. And I worked with him. We were going to do 3 prints, but we ended up doing 15 because we got a bit carried away.
And so this doesn't happen at this premises, it happened
at Chilford
Hall.
Yeah.
And so what was the paint a picture of the space that you're in. Because lithography is very different to etching, which you did have, that you've done before yourself. Yeah. So what was it like looking at the new equipment and the machinery and learning?
Well, the studio, the Curwen Studio, which was a professional print studio rather than a learning studio, it was huge. It was probably 2 or 3 times as big as this room. Daunting, and all along the walls were hundreds of pots of coloured paints, 2 very big mechanical plate lithography machines when you work on huge zinc plates, which is what commercial printers use, and also facilities for making stone lithography as well. So it was huge, and also when I was talking to Stanley about how to make these, I wanted to find a way of bringing drawn elements in with photographic elements with archived material, and to use a lot of colour. So he thought plate would be the best sort of lithography, and that involved a team of people. So we had to have someone working the press, someone working the photographic booths, because everything, I did with these was to assemble everything on acetate, which is then photographed, which is then developed onto the plates, and then we start printing. So it's a team, big teamwork to produce work like this. People have to be really skilled, and they were. I had never done anything like it before, and Stanley had also told me before I come that I wasn't allowed to bring any drawings, that I just had to come up with a head full of ideas and let the process speak, which was pretty scary, because you have this team of 5 or 6 people, everybody's waiting for your next decision, and you have to really sort of blag it out.
That you mentioned that on this morning, and then I was rereading the essay in the catalog the show, which is really beautiful. We'll come on to this later. Such a beautiful publication. But Julia Beaumont-Jones talks about Stanley wanting you to encourage that decisions would happen through the creative process, and wanted you to develop an intimate understanding of the technique as well. So how did you do that? How did you, with this team of people watching your every move, what was that like, learning about lithography?
Well, the thing is, working with Stanley, he was 55 years into his career, so he really knew his stuff. So the first print we did is the one in the corner over there, which is just, it's a colour print. That's just an experiment, which is a picture of an ear, a skull, and a textured background. So that one was sort of easy, because I thought of it as a test plate. I just wanted to see what was possible. And then I was staying at a B&B nearby, so I had to go home in the evening, order the photographs that I need, the photographic bits of the work that I needed in black and white to place on the acetate, and then I would draw. And I would draw and draw and draw, then I'd come in the next morning, and then we would start, 9 o'clock we would start, and so we'd lay down the photographs, I would make drawings with onto acetate, and then we would proof it, didn't like it, liked it, move things around, then it would be photographed, and then we started playing with colour. And it was really, you get into that space of making where you know you can do it. It's a sort of, there's nothing like being on the spot to make you do it. And things happened, like this print, for instance. I liked it without a background on as well as with a background, so we decided to edition both, because they have very different feels. And I remember on that print I told Stanley I wanted it in black and white, and when we came to proof it, it looked dreadful in black and white. So we then moved it towards a mauvey background and blue ink, and suddenly it comes alive. So it's experimenting as you're making, and huge amounts of papers, you know, whizzing around the place. I mean, it's terribly unecological, I suppose. But
so can I ask a minor question? So drawing onto acetate, what are you drawing with?
Ink, very dark lithographic inks, and pens and crayons, anything that would stick to the acetate.
And is it forgiving? Because obviously, if you're drawing straight onto a stone, it's hard with the touche. It's harder to edit as you go because once it's made, it's made. But is it easier to edit on the film?
Yeah, because you can rub it off with white spirits, or you can even cut it out and stick something else down.
So that's why it was such a good for a first, rather than like
it was great. And then you just get your energy in, and also I work a lot in white line rather than black line, so we then had to think about how to do that, and I can't remember how we did it. I must have scratched back into something. That must have been covered in a black surface, and then things were scratched back into it.
So it's so Stanley's sort of helping with the creative process, right? And you're feeding off of him, and he's feeding off of you, and that generates this sort of that's how the work happens. And that's difficult to. Not every artist likes working in that collaborative way, but you do.
I love it. I get a real buzz from it.
And this was the biggest project where that has happened before.
It was one of the biggest projects that I did. I mean, for instance, on this one, this is a portrait of Camille, one of the artists I was working with a schizophrenia diagnosis, and I wanted to use her words to make her portrait because I didn't want to be in between her and her experience. And Stanley had the idea of, so I hand wrote it all, and then Stanley had the idea of printing it once one way up and once the other way up, and then and I wanted it to be like writing on the wall, so we put a brick wall, so we did something that's called frottage, when you get a wall like this and you just, like a church brass rubbing, you just do that to get the marks. So he was constantly inventive about sort of ways that we could make a picture that might have been quite pedestrian otherwise, and then you get to the point when you're printing it in colour and trying to think how to make each layer stand where you want it to in terms of colour. I remember making that one. That was very exciting because it was quick to make, but it was just the cleverness of making a cacophony of sound by doing the writing upside down.
Yes. I'm quite interested in the heavy black backgrounds on some. They have this real inky quality. It reminds me of Redon. Of those which have these incredible intense blacks. His lithographs, where he clearly loved working in lithography because it was able to evoke this sort of. But I think for Redon, it's more like the things he's trying to evoke are sort of the like a literature background, or that's. But it's still about the sort of deepness of the mind. And is that for you? That it has the same. So when you're using these like really black backgrounds, that has the same quality.
Yeah, I think it's something I started using a lot when I've been working a lot with MRI scans and X-rays, because then you get sort of white light coming out of a very dark background, and I think I felt that was a sort of shorthand of expressing what's going on in the mind, that somehow, to me, white lines and white, it's always the white paper shining through, it's not using white ink, but it's a way of expressing, a consciousness at work, really.
But it is very difficult to achieve, and I think printmakers in history have struggled with. Some people do try and print with white ink on like black chine-collé, but that's really difficult to do technically. So it is. You did make life very difficult for yourself by wanting to do them, and it's really effective. And I love that where it gets all spidery when you've like scratched that.
Yeah, scratch. I like scratchy. Yeah,
the scratchy marks. So I think you described lithography as quite sort of generous mediums, but but was that surprising to you? Was there anything about the what Stanley helped you learn about lithography that was more surprising or more than you could have hoped for? This mixing maybe of the found images with your
It
own
was just plate lithography for these ones just made me feel that there was nothing I couldn't do if I wanted to. There was always a solution. I mean, that's partly Stanley, because he had done everything. And also things like, he would go edges, think about the edges of your picture, and if you see all these edges there, he really wanted it to sit properly on the paper rather than be squared off. And I think all those sort of extra touches are really, really interesting. And his colour sensibility was extraordinary, like putting the yellow on that skull there, just a touch of yellow, so that if it had just been grey, it wouldn't have sung in the same way. And we would mix colours and no, that's not right. This is, we'd get there in the end. So, as I say, the proofs were flying around the place at a huge rate to sort of make them work.
Yeah, much more of a technical, a creative partner than a technical guide.
Yeah, absolutely a creative partner. Very invested in the work, he was.
But as you say, he had 50 years of experience of working with so many other artists. And you were the last person to work with him on a major body of work.
Yeah.
And how did that? Well, you couldn't have known it was going to be his very last, although he was very years old. But how did that feel? Did that feel like a weight? The fact that he'd worked with as many artists that we can see named on the.
Yeah, no, I felt very privileged to be working with someone who'd worked with every big British artist through the 20th century, from the 1950s onwards, 1958 onwards. He'd chased artists all over, started down at St Ives, and then, Henry Moore and him had such a close relationship that Henry could sometimes talk a picture down the phone to him, and Stanley could make it. They were that close. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. And the anecdotes, I mean, Stanley again was a great one for telling stories of, he told me a story about Duncan Grant coming to the studio in London, and in the middle of working, he didn't dress very well, and his belt broke and his trousers fell down. And everyone was very embarrassed, and Duncan just said, "Have you got a piece of string?" and sort of tied it up and carried on. And, these wonderful sort of small stories that you wouldn't hear otherwise.
Yes, he chased people and must have said, "I could do something with
With you.
To
many people.
Oh, that's nice that he talked about those stories of his previous collaborations when he was working with you. Was there lots of space for conversation? Because you became friends after your...
Yeah, we were good friends. I mean, he retired, when I finished working with him, the Curwen Studio, I think he retired in about 2014 or 15, and then his focus became here on the Curwen Print Study Centre, which, as most of you know, is a wonderful facility for artists to use and for educational purposes. And Stanley was, in the last few years, Stanley and I would just come up and down together from London, and we'd see the certificate students together. And so I sort of, sadly, he passed away 2 or 3 years ago now. 3 years ago. And so I've become sort of Mrs. Stanley by, sort of doing the things that he used to do. And one of the reasons for having this show is because to support the this study centre, and so all the pictures, all the sales for any pictures that sell go straight here, and they're all at a very low price, so that the Curwen Study Centre can benefit, because it's time to pay back.
I think, yes, what was he like when he was engrossed in the work? What were you both like? Did he talk continuously? Or were there bursts of talking and then sort of silent working? Like, what was
both. It was a lot of talking, a lot of, he would leave me to, he didn't interfere in the composition. How, what I wanted the picture to look like was my business. But then once how do I do this, Stanley? He would, because I didn't know quite how to do things. And he would then come in and say, well, if you do that, then we can do it this way. or don't do that, it won't work. So he was constantly there as a mentor. He didn't ever say he liked something or didn't like it. It wasn't a mistake. You know, he didn't feel that was his job. His job was to make the best picture from the ideas that I had as possible.
It's incredibly difficult, like, you know, because he's an artist himself.
He's a wonderful artist himself.
That is
yeah.
a really difficult
Yeah.
place to hold,
Yeah.
isn't it? To not overstep and to get the best
Yeah.
work for you.
Yeah.
Without
There's that sort of gentle guidance, you know. Maybe you could try this.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
But it was always very, you know, I felt supported through it all. I think master printers are extraordinary people, and the good ones are all artists in their own rights as well, I think, because when they've got time.
Yes, because they understand.
Yeah.
Yes, what it is that you're wanting and what's possible.
Yeah. And Stanley taught at the Slade 1 or 2 days a week, right through his professional master printer days as well. So again, that's nurturing people into making work. So he must have been sort of flat out working.
Incredible, and such a, you know, he didn't just do it for a bit and then stop. He was obviously really dedicated to this. And the amount, and that's so interesting that talking to Henry Moore over the phone and being able to realise an image through not even being in the same room together. Because I was telling you in the car on the way over about this cache of letters that we've got between John Constable, who died in 1837, and his printmaker, and they worked a lot by correspondence with letters to and fro, because the printing wasn't happening in Constable's house. And there's quite a lot of the mood swings of like being content and then irate and content and irate. It goes up and down. It's very difficult to do if you're not at the same place. But then I think so the element of trust that the master printer is able to generate in the artist they're working with is hugely important. It seems to me, and you must have trusted Stanley, and he.
I did, yeah. I mean, there must have been days when it didn't work. I mean, I've probably edited them out of my brain a bit, but there must have been pictures that I was less pleased with than others, or he was less pleased with. But basically, we felt that we were motoring, so that's why we carried on to make you know sort of more pictures rather than less, because we got into this feeling that we were beginning to find a language, because that's what you're always looking for at the beginning of a project, the sort of visual language, the visual equivalence to find a way to make work that speaks to the subject or the emotion that you're feeling.
And then the code prints that came after Reassembling itself, there's some brilliant pictures in this binder.
I think they're all in the top drawer.
And there's some in the top drawer pull out, and photos of Susan and Stanley working together. What was the so these are work you were working directly on stone rather than the plates. What was there, apart from material, what difference did that make, or if any? Because that was a deep dive right into the
stone is more complicated, and I needed Stanley's direction even more.
Tell them the story about the.
Yeah, he's so naughty. When I came to make a stone, I was quite nervous about it because it's stone lithography is notoriously complicated, and I'd done enough of it in the past to know that I didn't really understand it. So he said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll start off with a lovely small stone." So I thought, "Oh, thank goodness." And then he came walking out, laughing his head off, with the biggest stone I'd ever seen, which in fact is that second one there, that one there. And I went, "Oh my God, Stanley!" He just laughed. And but then he told me I had a Polaroid, because stones you grind off the image usually. So he told me I had a Polaroid underneath mine, so that made me feel quite happy. And so this huge bit of Bavarian stone, and I didn't know how to. The project I wanted to do, I'd met a young girl with Down syndrome, and I wanted to make work that explored this idea of genetic coding, because you have an extra gene if you have Down syndrome. And my idea was to make it's going to be a series of 5 pictures, and I wanted to make the last one first and the first one last. So I started off with a fixed genetic code, and then I work back to the moment of conception, as it were. And so that was, I mean, that was ridiculously complicated for my first stone, getting 5 prints out of one stone. But we had, I mean, we had an extraordinary time making them, because the thing about stone is if you make marks that you don't like, you can just grind it off in the middle of making it. So in a way, it gave me more drawing freedom than the plate lithography. But I think it was a very, very ambitious, not over ambitious, but it was a very ambitious project. And I think the first 3 prints we got I really like, and I think I got a bit lost towards the end. But it was, and we did it over, I did it over about 2 years, because I had lots of exhibitions on at the time, so I was sort of coming and going. And so I've never shown that work. It's totally experimental. I quite like it, but I can't say that they're resolved. That's what I feel about them.
Oh, really?
I don't think they're quite resolved.
Oh. I'm surprised. Well, I think they're very beautiful, and maybe that's fine that they're.
Yeah, I mean, not that I do anything to.
No,
I mean, I can't, because Stanley's not here to help. But they're. I felt a bit out of control by the end of it. That's the truth.
Bit off more than you could. No,
Yeah.
I don't think you did.
Oh, anyway, have a look at them anyway. See what you think, and it's nice to have other eyes on them.
And was there something about the experience of working with Stanley on these 2 works, especially the extended period of code, that impacted your subsequent work? Would you say that there's?
Yeah, I think that it's certainly working on the stone, it loosened me up to mark making and to be a lot more experimental. And I think what I do in my own studio, I use monoprint in the same way I work with the lithography, really. So, you know, then I'll just ink up a huge black aqua tinted plate and then sort of dive into it with chemicals and white marks. And I think that really changed my practice that way, because before that I did etching, which I love etching, but again, it didn't give me the freedom that the lithography did. So it was really transformative. So nothing to regret ever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then another reason why you shouldn't think of the code as unresolved, because they help feed into.
Yeah. No, I mean, I mean, sometimes you just feel that about a piece of work. It just is what it is. It's not a problem, because something else always comes out of it.
Yes. I have, so I think a couple more questions, and then we should open up for the room. But the I was, yes. Yeah, if you could spend, if Stanley was still here and you could spend more time with him, what do you think you might, is there something that has percolated or piqued your interest that you thought I could have dealt with, could have done with Stanley's help on this one? I think I'm doing a lot of my work recently has been my work's usually to do with the human condition in some way. I've been working a lot on emotional responses, and I think I could have done I would love to have worked with Stanley on pictures where there are very few marks. What I'm liking at the moment is work that just bits of light and bits of things come through, and I think Stanley and I would have had a ball working on that sort of very minimal work, because these are very full on and sort of all, and, you know, there's marks everywhere, whereas I think we could have just really focused on different areas and just looked at different tones and textures. So that would have been a wonderful thing to work with him on. But it seems like he did change your. I mean, you were a printmaker before Stanley, but he changed your confidence in thinking about this. Yeah.
And the scale I worked. I mean, he made me realise I could work really big, and that they worked at that scale. And because I've shown them a lot in galleries with a lot of space, that sometimes you need big work to hold the space.
Did he come to see the show in Newcastle?
He didn't.
No. He's like, I know everything there is.
Yeah, no. Well, I don't think he wanted to travel that far. He used to come to my shows in London. He came to the National Portrait Examination. And that was always really nice.
And what do you think of your beautiful publications that you produce? Susan does these she loves this aspect of making too, down to this one's the reassembling the self is your favourite?
Yeah, it's one of my favourites. Yeah.
It's held together by the text and then into held together with this elastic of all of these supplementary illustrations, and it's interweaved in a very beautiful way. Yes, what does Stanley think to seeing the work illustrated in this form?
No, he loved it, and he loved the fact that the project's called Reassembling the Self, and you can reassemble the catalogue, and he thought that was very funny.
He does sound like a character.
He was amazing man. Well, and you know, those of you who've done courses here know what a legacy he's left, and it's just wonderful.
What do you think it is that Stanley understood about artists, sort of psychologies of artists?
I've often thought about that. It's a very good question. I think he understood that you have to let them go. We were talking about someone, when we were on the way here, someone who's over-controlling and can't let go of people. Well, Stanley was the opposite. He would just push you into the water and see what happened. And he loved that, which is why he said, turn up with no drawings. And I thought it was beyond scary, but
But you had a life jacket on when you were pushed in.
Yeah, Stanley was my life jacket. But I think he knew that you have to, you know, and I'm sure he was a brilliant teacher at art school in the same way. He never tried to impose his vision on what you were doing. It's his duty to understand what you wanted to do, and that takes generosity of spirit, I think.
Well, that seems a good point to end, to open up for questions. But I can definitely think of more if questions are. People want to take their time to think. Oh no, we've already got some.
Hi Susan,
Hi.
we met last year.
We did. How are you?
It's lovely to see you, thank you. Taking in no drawings, I'm an absolute planner. Can you talk me through how you researched something, knowing that you couldn't take a drawing in, but how did you create that mindset to actually have some knowledge about what you wanted to produce, but about the subject matter?
Well, I've been working as an artist in residence up at Newcastle University, working with scientists, psychiatrists and patients on who were looking into schizophrenia. So I did a lot of reading research. I'm very research is really heavy research as part of what I do before I start working, and then I do. I mean, I came with no drawings, but I had been playing with drawings in the studio, textures, images. I've researched lots of antique images and visited museums, particularly the Hunterian Museum in London, because I wanted to think about the relationship between anatomy and you know, the relationship between the mind and the body. I mean, how do you visualise that? So I wanted to be quite literal by using, you know, very obvious anatomy, always in the wrong place. And so I came with lots of visual ideas, but no sketchbooks about the next, these are going to be the drawings I'm going to work with. And it worked. But I think it worked because Stanley was also determined that it would work. He wasn't, you know, he wasn't interested in me showing him a drawing and working out how to make that into a print. He wanted something, the process to actually happen to make the picture. And it's a really, really exciting way to work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan, I'm fascinated by the story of the series on the Down syndrome girl. And you said you started at the last and you wanted to work your way through to the first, and you didn't get there. What happened?
Sorry, could you say that again?
That's true.
What happened? Well, I started, so the first picture I made, it's so much easier to they're in the drawers. So the first picture shows, it's a sort of head, and it has chromosomes sort of writ into it, and sort of all sorts of other stuff going on. So what happened, each layer going back to the big, so I was trying to get back to the, as it were, the moment of conception, which is the image that you see on the stone there.
That's the last of it.
That's the last of it. And it didn't, I don't think it worked as a print as well as the other ones did. So I think I should have reworked it, but I think we ran out of time and energy on it because we've been going on it for 2 or 3 years.
And did you make a series of prints at each stage?
Yeah, so we've editioned it. So there are 5 prints, and maybe it's only me. The thing is, when you look at your own work, you don't see it like other people do. And other people, you know, I'm always interested. People often, when they see a show, they always want to tell me which is their favourite picture, which I find really interesting, because you have a relationship with work that isn't to do with its quality necessarily as an artist. It's to do with how you made it. And so that's what I, you know, it'd be you know, we'll have a look at them after this and see if you can make sense of why I'm saying that. But the first 3, I felt there was a sense of something was fixed at the end. You know, her chromosome was there, and before that, it's just sort of fizzling away. Well, it's going that way, but I was making it that way. And it might be to do with the fact it just got too busy at the end. But maybe.
Or maybe that represented the beginning.
But yeah, maybe conception is a bit busy.
But if it was over such a long period of time, and there's like working backwards, because you can't go back again.
You've got rid of that stuff.
That's edition.
So yeah. No, but it's, I need to revisit them, is the truth. I've just had, you know, I'll have a look at them and maybe I'll think that they work now. I think that the 3 first ones do. The 3 first last ones. Does that make any sense?
Yes, but did the template remain the same?
Yeah, it was the same stone,
yes,
and it had
and
the same sort of head shape was on it. But I was just trying to deconstruct it more and more each
fascinating
time.
to see it animated, wouldn't it?
It would. It would have been, and it would have been.
Like a flip book.
Yes, it would have been very nice to have taken it at every stage, because we worked hard every time to make it work. But I think it was a good idea. I think it was an excellent way to try and make a suite of prints, to sort of go back to the beginning.
Can I just ask, how do you decide, having done your research and got your concept, what's that thinking process that works out what best printmaking technique, what language of print will work well with that particular concept?
That's a good question.
It's a very good question. I experiment. I do a lot of experimenting in the studio, and often on a small scale, because I tend to work quite big nowadays, which drives my agent mad because they like to sell small things more. So I experiment, and sometimes I can't make it work. So then I think, oh, maybe I should try etching, or maybe I should. And recently I've been doing more lithography up in Edinburgh, and that was interesting as well, because I've learnt that plate lithography, like these ones are, is a very interesting technique if you want to put things underneath other things. These ones, in the same way I did these in a way, but they were layered in, I'm just trying to think how many layers these were.
Sometimes it looks like, well, in the first one it looks like 4.
3 or 4 layers, yeah. So going back to, so layering is something I'm back into a lot. So lithography is proving, and I've actually been mixing lithography with relief printing, and it works really well. So that's something I've never done before. So I think it's always, I do get a sort of visual direction, and then I have to work out how to. So it's the research, then it's followed by the technique. How do you make that? And I'm also quite efficient. I like to make it in a way that is the least fuss, because you can overwork printing by just doing too many things. So I would like to really plan it so that it's the minimum amount of layers and amount of work to make it work. So that's an experimental time.
That's quite a contradiction, isn't it? Because, you know, having to plan the layers versus trying to draw something organically without drawings with you. That's, you
Well, once we got into, perhaps I haven't really, it's like I've told you a half truth. When I was working with Stanley, when we found where we were going with the work, then I would go home every night and plan the layers and come back in the next morning, because there was this team of people waiting to work with me. What he wanted was to give me time to get inside lithography, so that I wouldn't try and, so that I let the process make the direction. But once we knew the direction, then I did have to plan the layers every night. You caught me out there.
No, it's okay. I'm trying to find stuff.
No, you're quite right.
But that's really interesting about the not wanting to overwork, because I think sometimes printmaking can. I love prints, but I think sometimes they can suffer from that. You know, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And having the language that the right language for the idea is what makes a great print a great print.
And I work a lot with another master printer called Nigel Oxley, who's an etcher, and he and I have got some of the etching. We can do it all in one 3-minute etch, which we're very proud of, and that's by thinking through what needs to do in what order. And I also like the work to look as if it has just arrived on the paper and it might just flit off again. So I like this sense of impermanence. So overworking is my night. It would be, if I thought all my work looked overworked, I'd hate it, because I'd rather just find a blank piece of paper there than something overworked.
Any more questions from the floor?
What next for you? What medium?
What medium next? Well, I've just finished this print with relief printing and lithography, so that's nice. I want to get back into the studio and finish off a project I've been doing about grief and the slippery thing that grief is. So I think I need to finish that, and I think there'll be monoprints, because I'm in the mood for working quite fast, and I know I can do that fast. But I'll probably say that and go into the studio tomorrow, and then I'll realise it's the wrong thing and decide I've got to do something else. So I've been very sort of exhibition based this year. I've got a lot of shows on, and so I want some quiet. I want a quiet summer, and I sort of want to be a bit undirected, so that I can sort of find a new way to go. Because if you don't have those periods of time, I then go into doing it all over, doing the same thing over and over again, and that's not what I want to be doing. Getting too old for that, it's not enough time to do the same thing again.
We wish you a big long stretch of undirected time.
Yeah, I know.
For the next project. But your prints look really beautiful up here all together. Speaking to each other.
Thank you to the Curwen for such a beautiful hang. It looks great.
That's Grace.
Grace is out of the room. It's a beautiful hang. It looks great. And
does the Fitzwilliam have a set of Susan's self-cell
we don't
prints?
have this set. We have transients and the passing thoughts and the etchings, which have this real ethereal quality to them, don't they? Yes. But they're smaller works. Those etchings. These are.
the British Museum and the V&A have got some of these, but most museums don't like the scale of them.
Oh no.
I mean, they're harder to store if they're big, aren't they? Or not necessarily. I don't know what your storage is like.
These similar to these plan chests.
But it would be nice because of the Stanley connection. We'll talk about that.
Yes, and the code prints as well. Especially if you've never shown them.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a possibility there.
Yeah, they've never been seen outside of my studio until here.
We have to think what we can show them with.
Yeah.
Very intriguing.
Yeah,
Have
a good look at them.
Yes, please, ideas into the hat for that. Really great.
it would be very nice to find quite a printmaker, either on a tiny scale or something that, or someone's working on. I mean, I can't be the first person who's worked front to back, can I?
No, we were saying, I was saying, oh, is it like the liner cuts where you just, you know, relief liner
Is it
cuts.
relief? No, reduction liners. Reduction.
Yeah,
liners.
reduction, thank you, where you have, I mean, it's like, you have to be a master chess player, I always think, because you know the end, you know what you look like, or what the end goal looks like, and you have to start several stages before that and make no mistakes in the cutting because there's no going back afterwards. Yeah. It's a similar frame of mind because you wanted to work that way.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Yeah, is that so? You've given us some lovely tantalising glimpses of anecdotes from Stanley and these bits of personality. Is there another one episode that another sort of defining anecdote you can leave us with?
Well, there's a very funny one when he told me when he was working with Barbara Hepworth down in St Ives, and she was quite a personality, and they were working on a lithograph. I think she used to knock on his door at 3 in the morning saying, "Stanley, I've got an idea." So he used to have to get up and go and work with her. And they were working one sunny afternoon, and there was a huge sonic boom went off, and she went, "Oh my God, it's ruined my creative process. I can't stand it." And Stanley said, "Oh, well, what was it?" She said, "Oh, I think it was that bloody Concorde." She said, "I'm going to phone the Prime Minister." And Stanley looked at her, and she did phone the Prime Minister because she knew him. And she said, you know, and I mean, I'm sure he couldn't stop Concorde going over, but it was just her sort of sheer force and volume of personality and Stanley was so the opposite. So it must have been, he must have just laughed his head off. It must have been great. No, he has many, many great stories. Anyway, thank you, Eleanor.
And you, in preparation for this, you reminded me that there's a wonderful episode that you produced on Stanley Jones, working with Stanley Jones, and it's available on BBC Sounds.
That's right.
And it's half an hour long, and you can listen to it on the car.
Oh yes, and you hear Stanley talking. It's called The Print Master.
Yes.
And it's on Radio Full Sounds. Excellent.
Yeah, it's lovely to hear his voice too. It's such a way of good intonation. It's unmistakable.
Yeah.
I recommend that.
Yeah, master of understatement. Yeah, I was just saying at lunchtime that you'd finish a print you'd be really pleased with, and I'd get a bit all overexcited, and he'd go, "Yes, really satisfactory." Oh, Stanley, come on. Give me a bit more than that.
Maybe it was the clue to his longevity that he wasn't.
He never got overexcited.
Well, thank you to Stanley, and thank you to you, Susan.
And thank you so much for coming during your sabbatical break. And thank you all for coming. It's lovely to see you.
Thank you.